Hello, and welcome to the My Heart and Mind podcast, where it's all about creating the feel-good mindset so you can make the most of every moment and reap the benefits of getting the most happiness out of life. And now, over to your host, Sally Crawley.
Welcome to episode 14 of the My Heart and Mind podcast. Today, Brian Simpson joins me. He suffered a massive heart attack at the age of 48. Prior to that, he was exceptionally healthy and lived a very active life. His heart attack occurred during an ice hockey match, and he spent 20 to 25 minutes on his own in the dark, unable to move. Did he see the light? Despite there being a number of factors that seemed to make the situation difficult, he was lucky in so many ways, including having paramedics, having a quick coffee at Tim Hortons, and they arrived speedily and gave him the help that he needed. He describes his experience in the Cath Lab, his opportunities to take part in a pilot, and his magnificent cardiac recovery. His heart health before the attack gave him the edge in getting better quick. After suffering the life-changing heart attack over 4 years ago, he set out to change how he was showing up in the world. He left a 25-year marriage, his job in a big pharmaceutical company, and travelled extensively on his new motorcycle through Canada, the USA and Central America. He was searching for his purpose in life and ultimately happiness. Brian shares with us his acceptance of abuse as a young child, how it created anger, guilt and shame, a secret and pain that he stuffed down into his broken heart. Meditation was and still is a key element in helping Brian manage stress and heal his heart. Brian believes that stress is one of the main contributors to his heart attack and likely to be behind many other people's heart health issues. A chance meeting with a monk at an airport, the circumstances that followed, then later his journey to India plays an important part in his life, and how he now focuses on helping other people through meditation and mindset coaching. Brian also explains how much he has changed as a person since his heart attack. His friends say that he's quite unrecognisable from the man he was before. Not physically, as he is fit and healthy, just like prior to his heart attack, but emotionally, he now chooses to be how he wants to be in this life. He admits to being a recovering negative talker. This is a fascinating interview, so stop and have a listen to what Brian has to say. He is the heart attack thriver, and he has a checklist too. Hi, Brian. Welcome to the show. I'd like you to just take a few minutes if you'd introduce yourself and tell our listeners a little bit about your life before your heart attack.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on, Sally. Truly honored. So I am Canadian, currently living in California, and 5 years ago, this past January, I suffered a massive heart attack at the age of 48. And prior to that, I was almost 20 years as a pharmaceutical rep, or as I jokingly like to call it, a drug dealer or drug pusher.
Mm-hmm.
Really active lifestyle, never smoked, no real cardiovascular disease of any kind, like no blood pressure issues, no cholesterol issues, an avid cyclist, raced bikes, really, I'm a competitive guy, played competitive hockey. And, I said, I just literally, was doing what I thought, was all the right things. And, fast forward to, January 17th, playing ice hockey, and, I start to experience some really weird sensations going on. It ended up being a heart attack, start of a heart attack.
Mm-hmm. Did you carry on playing the game, or did you have to come off the ice?
So I'll just, before I'll answer that, I'll just describe sort of what I had, because it's not textbook. So I worked, and I should also just preface this, that I worked in healthcare as a pharmaceutical rep. We're incredibly well trained. I worked in cardiovascular disease. I sold blood pressure medications, cholesterol medications, that type of thing. So I knew the symptoms. And what I experienced, Sally, was what I would call an out-of-body experience in a way. I had this gold orb that was above my head, about maybe a foot out, from my right eye. And it was just ever present. And then I had this all over kind of, it'd be really hard to describe it. I called it a what the feeling, because it was a combination of a little bit of lightheadedness and some nausea and just malaise. Like it was really weird. And I stopped in that moment, and I went to the bench and I sat down, and for a moment I actually thought to myself, and I said to myself, is this what a heart attack's like? Knowing that I had no chest pain, I had nothing left sided. And I just, I ruled it out, and I think it went away. I went back out again, fine, came back. And then the third time I went back out again, it came back 100 times worse. And I'm like I said, I'm a competitive guy. I was actually in the play fighting for the puck, and it came back, and I pulled up, and I immediately skated away from the play, which is so not me. And went to the bench, and everyone's going like, what's going on? And I said, well, I'm not feeling well. I don't know what's going on. I'm going home. So I proceeded to grab my stuff, and I skated to the dressing room off the ice by myself. No one was expecting anything, myself included. And I was in the dressing room. I started to get undressed. And when I bent over to undo my ice hockey skates, that's when the shortness of breath, the dry heaves happened, and I just slumped over. I fell backward and slumped over against the wall. And we figure I was in there somewhere 20, 25 minutes like that alone.
Gosh, as in you're unconscious for that 20 minutes.
Here's the crazy thing. I was fully conscious, but I was paralyzed. I couldn't move, and I couldn't talk.
Okay.
So I couldn't yell for help. I couldn't. I remember thinking my phone was within arm's reach, my cell phone. And I remember thinking I need to call 911, but I couldn't move. And, a friend of mine after the fact made a joke about this, but it was a newer hockey arena, and the lighting was on a timer. So because there was no movement, or because I'm literally in the room and I'm not moving, the lights went out. And so the room went completely dark. So I'm sitting in complete darkness. And my friend joked and said, good thing you didn't see the light.
Oh, ever the comic, eh?
Right. And, but again, it's really interesting, and this is fascinating to me. And I don't know, why exactly, but I was really calm. What I remember the wall, because I had no clothes on my top. Because I'd taken off my Under Armour that I wear on top, and I just remember how cold the wall was, the concrete wall. It was like I was leaning against ice. It just felt so cold to me. And I heard, the buzzer go, signifying the end of the game, and I knew that help was on the way. And guys come into the dressing room, and Malcolm Quigley, who's a former police officer who was retired, came in, saw me right away, knew that I was in trouble, came over to me, and he started, yelling at me, Brian, look at me. But I couldn't move. I could look at him, but I couldn't move. And I remember he grabbed my head and he held it up, and he said to me after, he said, like, you were cold, clammy. Your pupils were the size of, like silver dollars. And I could barely get a pulse. And he said, call 911. And, he told me after, he said, we complain about all the training we have to do for first aid and CPR when we're police officers, but he said, my training kicked in right there, and I knew something was wrong. I knew we were in trouble. And, in Canada, there's a coffee company called Tim Hortons. Tim Hortons coffee is famous in Canada. If you've ever been to Canada, they're on every corner almost. It seems like they're kind of like Starbucks. And there just happened to be paramedics. We were out in a remote town, not anywhere near a hospital, and there was 2 paramedics that were sitting in their ambulance having a Tim Hortons coffee when the 911 call came in. And they were able to be by my side in around 5 minutes.
Wow, that's brilliant.
And, and then from there, Len Van Pelt was the paramedic, the attending paramedic, and he was so calm, and he hooked me up to an EKG. He gave me an IV. He was, once they gave me the IV, I could talk. I could share what I was feeling. The EKG showed that I was having heart trouble, but I wasn't having a heart attack. But they still give you all the medications, the clot busters and, Plavix and baby aspirin. And so as they were assessing me, they made the decision, because of the protocol for care in Canada, is they need to take you to the closest hospital. It wasn't a cardiac center. So they got me into the ambulance. They took me to the hospital. And on the way to the hospital, we were almost there, from what I remember. That's when the you hear people talk about this, the elephant on the chest. It's like or a car was parked on my chest. It obviously not, but that pressure, the weight of that, Sally, was and I think you maybe can experience this too, or experience that as well. It's a fascinating thing, but it's a pressure. I remember I was squirming as if I could get out from underneath it. I just remember being so uncomfortable and so much discomfort. And he kept me calm. He said, Brian, when we get this fixed, you'll be out of pain. It'll all stop. And as we arrived into the emerge bay, it moved from being not a heart attack to a heart attack.
Yeah.
And I remember him saying to his partner, the second one is there. And when I say the second one is there, I ended up having a STEMI, which is an ST elevated myocardial infarction. There's 2 ST waves on a normal EKG. When one is elevated, which is what it was in the dressing room, that signifies heart trouble. When both are there, it means you're having a heart attack and that you've got a blockage. And I've since learned too, he actually identified the blockage, which is really unusual. His level of training obviously was very good, very smart guy. I've had a conversation with several doctors about my case in particular, and my type of heart attack. I had the back of the heart, the circumflex artery was 100% blocked. And that's missed a lot. It's missed a lot on an EKG. It doesn't present the same as, let's say, a Widowmaker one with the LAD or the right coronary. And so they still took me in, even though, I was having a heart attack. Now I needed to go to a cardiac center, but because we were in the emerge bay already, they took me in and they put me on I believe it's a 13 lead. So a more sophisticated EKG. They struggled because, I was sweaty, clammy, to get the last leads on the back of my heart. And this EKG gives them a better look at the back of the heart. And again, I remember the doctor, as soon as they hooked it up and they looked at TV, he looked at me and said, Brian, you're having a heart attack. We need to get you to the cardiac center. Yeah. So back in the ambulance. And that's the last thing I remember. I think at that point they were giving me medications. I remember him telling me, I'm giving you injections of morphine to relax your heart, to try and minimize the damage. I believe I received a very large bolus of morphine, because I don't remember the drive. I remember them trying to go up into my heart through the artery in my arm. Yeah, and I remember how painful it was. And I remember saying how much it hurt. And it's because my vessels were collapsing, because I was dying. You have 90 minutes to survive what I had. And, we were already, 60 minutes into it. So, there's obviously a real urgency. So they ended up going up through my femoral artery. I woke up on the table. The doctor that saved my life, her name is Dr. Katie Schufelt. I knew her through my job because I used to call on her as a physician. She's also an avid cyclist, so I knew her through cycling. And she showed me, how bad I was when I arrived in. She said, Brian, you have no idea how lucky you are to survive what you had. And that's kind of the start of the journey for me.
Right. I mean, it sounds to me that was quite a journey, because there were so many opportunities where it was kind of going wrong. And then all of a sudden there was a really lucky thing that the paramedics were there. And, I'm so glad that it kind of worked out well for you. During the time that you were going through this, did you feel that you had feelings of anxiety and stress, or were you quite comforted in the fact that actually the people around you had got this?
I don't remember being stressed out at all, honestly. I remember being really calm in the dressing room, even though I couldn't move, I couldn't talk. I don't remember any fear or panic or anything like that at all. I actually have said this a lot, and I do still say it, is if there was a checklist that one needed to tick off the items on this checklist to not only be a survivor, but a thriver, I ticked every box, from the fact that my teammate recognized, that I was in trouble, that I shut it down, that I stopped playing hockey. I knew well enough my body that something wasn't right. And I stopped, to the paramedics being 5 minutes away, and having and not just paramedics, they were the highest level of paramedics that have all the medications, all the equipment. So not every ambulance has that in Canada.
Yeah.
And, just everything, Sally, just really, played in my favor, and ensured that I'd have, the good outcome. The cardiac center that I went to was a fairly new cardiac center. I would have had a much longer trip to get to a cardiac center if it weren't for I've got the t-shirt on here, Peterborough Regional Hospital. They just invested millions in this new cardiac Cath Lab, and, the training they all had. So no, I feel very blessed, and I don't, I didn't really feel that. And it's interesting. I never really felt that, even after, anxiety or stress. I've been very fortunate because I was given a really good outcome. The next morning after my heart attack, I was in the ICU, and Dr. Schufelt came to check on me, and she brought with her Dr. Ball, who was the other interventional cardiologist working at the hospital. He was a marathon runner. She's an avid cyclist. And they both said to me, Brian, without a doubt, because you were so fit, because you were a cyclist, that saved your life.
Yeah, yeah. And so having a strong heart in the first place, it's not just about a preventative, it's about actually, let's kind of, after the event, it's about make our hearts as strong as possible as we are going through life. And I guess that definitely proved benefits for you. So did you have any stents or that put in, or was it just remove the blockage?
So in the moment when I arrived at the Cath Lab, protocol is I had 100% blockage. So yes, I was stented. So they put a stent in my circumflex artery. And, once I was out of danger, as soon as that was opened up, they ballooned it and stented it, I was out of danger. She showed me on the TV screen, like I'm lying on the table in the Cath Lab, and she showed me what it looked like. The whole back of my heart was black when I arrived. And then after the stent, after the ballooning and stent, it was getting blood. And I was told that I had, like I said, I had 100% blockage of the circumflex artery. I had a greater than 70% blockage of the right coronary artery, and I had a greater than 40% blockage of the left anterior descending, or the LAD, often also called the widowmaker. So I had blockages in all three of my arteries.
Okay. And did they treat all three, or are some on the watch list?
So, in that moment, like I said, the protocol was you treat the blockage. Anything that's less than 90%, generally speaking, they don't stent. So they didn't stent anything else. However, having said that, and again, back to this checklist I mentioned earlier, a day after my heart attack, I'm in recovery in the hospital. I was approached by a clinical trials guy at the hospital. He said, we have this study and we think you're a suitable candidate for it. And it was called the COMPLETE trial. And complete meaning that if you have somebody who comes in like I did with 100% blockage, obviously you're going to go and you're going to fix that and stent it or balloon it at least. But the study was looking at if you have someone who has something that's greater than 70, where it was greater than 90 before, should you intervene? Should you have a complete intervention? And so I was, again, working in pharmaceutical. Clinical trials are really important, for any medication. It's information we need. And I was, yes, I want to be part of this, knowing very well that, it was randomized, blinded. But I knew that I had a 50-50 chance, because ethically they can't do a placebo stent. They can't go in and do the whole procedure and not actually put a stent in. So you literally will know, once they randomize you. So I said yes to the study. I had a chance of getting it treated or not. But the other thing, which again made a decision very easy for me, was that I was going to have a level of care. Anybody in the study, because that was going to be one thing that would be the same, would be, 2 cardiologists following you, 5 years follow up, nurses calling you, checking in on you, being brought in for further testing, being very closely monitored. So, if I didn't get treated, I still was going to get a level of care I wouldn't have got otherwise. So it made the decision quite easy. And, I know this is kind of the mindset you come from and your sort of spirituality. I mean, I manifested it because I kept saying, I'm getting treated. I kept saying to the doctors, I'm getting treated. You're going to treat me. And they said, Brian, it doesn't work that way. And I'm like, I know, but I know you're going to treat me. And they went away. And after I signed all the documents and paperwork, and they came back and, got a smile and said, you got what you wanted. We're going to go in tomorrow and we're going to do it. So I ended up being randomized for treatment, which I was super grateful for. And the next day they went in and they actually had to use 2 overlapping stents. The blockage was so long in my right coronary artery, they had to actually do overlapping stents. So I have a total of 3 stents now. And I just want to go back to that checklist again. Because
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, because this is another thing. I know, Sally, from the way I am, if I had have been released from hospital, knowing that I still had a blockage of greater than 70%, I would have been all up in my head about it. I really feel the fact that I left there knowing that I had no major blockages. And they said, we're confident the medications, the cholesterol medications will knock down the blockage in the LAD. That allowed me to go back to my life and begin the process of healing.
I like that because it's like an engine rebuilt, original body runs like a dream. Yeah. So that's fantastic because it is about mindset and about beliefs, isn't it, in life? So tell us a little bit more about this checklist of being from a survivor to a thriver.
Yeah, so I call myself the heart attack thriver. That kind of came intuitively. I've become very spiritual. I've had a real awakening since my heart attack. And I can tell you more about that if you want. But, for me, it really was, I was so grateful, for the care I received. I just, feel that there was some higher power at work here. And I say that because that gold orb, my relationship to it has changed over the years. Like I said, I'm 5 years out from my heart attack back in January. And a couple of years ago, I was with friends having dinner, 2 young kids. Claire, who was 11 years old at the time, her dad was very curious about my heart attack. What were the symptoms like? Like most people are, they're curious, but they know that I was super fit. Like, why did you have a heart attack? I get that question all the time. And I'm talking about this gold orb, and Claire's like, you saw God. And they're not religious people. They don't go to church. But in her mind, and in that moment, my relationship with that changed because it was unexplainable. Doctors couldn't explain what it was.
Yeah.
I've come to the realization, I believe it was my guardian angel, that was there telling me, once again, I got your back, Brian. I got your back. Because it was the 3rd time I cheated death. I almost died at 18 of a massive internal bleed. And at 15, I was in a car accident. They said no one should have survived, and I walked away.
Golly gosh. I said to somebody the other day, it's cats that have 9 lives, not us humans, but you're well on your way. I'm
well on my way. That's why I say I'm on my 4th chance, Sally. I'm on my 4th chance.
You said you'd tell us a bit more about your spiritual journey through this. How did life change for you after coming out of hospital and thinking, right, okay, I'm fixed? What am I going to do about my life? What life changes were there?
Yeah, around the 6-month mark, I'd been doing really well on the stress test and all the testing they do following a heart attack to see what kind of damage you had in your heart. And I was sent to a clinic in Toronto. And this clinic really is world renowned for their work in cardiac rehab, specifically in high intensity interval training as part of cardiac rehab. And for anybody who's listening, who's had a heart attack, cardiac rehab is something you need to do. It can reduce the chance of having another event. And if you do have one, it can reduce your chance of dying by over 75%. So it's a really important thing. So I was sent to this very special cardiac rehab center in Toronto because I was blowing these tests out of the water. They had never seen anybody really performing like I had. And again, it goes back to my cycling and my fitness level. And I was put through what's known as a VO2 max test or a step test, where I was on a stationary bike, and every 30 seconds they make it harder. And the idea is you go until you can't go anymore. And it gets harder and harder. And obviously the harder it gets, the more your heart rate. And so I'm hooked up. There's 3 technicians in the room. There's 2 cardiologists. They're watching me. One's looking remotely. The other one's in the room. And you do this test. And there was the one cardiologist who was in the room. She was an older Indian woman. And she kept saying, Brian, okay, we've got everything we need. We're good. You can stop the test. And I'm like, no, I'm going to keep going. I want to keep going. And she said, you don't need to. And I kept going, and I did. I went until I couldn't go anymore. And I actually was able to reproduce numbers I'd put up back in 2007. So almost, 9 years previous, and before the heart attack. And she said, you're really stubborn. And I said, I am. And, so, right.
Against yourself.
And yeah. Right. And so I was taken, after everything, once I was done the test and I did stop because I couldn't go anymore. I literally took the test because I know how the test is supposed to work. And I took it till I could not literally turn the pedals over anymore. They took me into a room, and Dr. O, who was the doctor I was there to see, he said, Brian, why are you here? And why did you want this test? And I looked at him. I said, Dr. O, because I want to know what I can do, not what I can't do.
Yeah.
And if I'm going to have another heart attack while I'm riding my bicycle, I want it to happen right here where you can save me. And he said, Brian, there is no sign that you had a heart attack, and go live your life. And in that moment, Sally, that was the green light for me to make some changes. And I say this, sincerely, that to a lot of people that have known me most of my life, I'm unrecognizable to them now.
Right.
I left a 25-year marriage about 8 months after my heart attack. I ended up traveling. I went over. My son was a really competitive cyclist too. He was on the Olympic team for Canada, so I was over in Europe watching him compete. I was flying back to Toronto in Amsterdam. I run into this Buddhist monk in the airport as I arrive at the airport, and get a picture with him and say goodbye. I told him I'm learning to meditate. I've learned to meditate, and I'm there 3 hours early for my flight. Half an hour before we're ready to leave, who comes on the plane? This same monk, and he sits behind me. My intuition told me to stop and talk to him when I first saw him in the airport there. And then he's on the same flight as me, which is just crazy. And at one point during the flight, I could have talked to zero off the whole flight. But I didn't. I was respectful, but I had a conversation, and I shared about my heart attack. And, I got emotional. He put his hand on my shoulder and said, I can help you heal. I can help you heal from the inside out with meditation and mindfulness. And you should come to India to work with me. And I've always wanted to do that. The Dalai Lama has been somebody I've read his books and have been very, intrigued by. And, but I couldn't because of my job. And, but we exchanged information, and he said, I'd like to come to your small town and teach people how to meditate. I'd like to come and do a half-day workshop. And I'm like, oh, I would love that. So we exchanged contact information and stayed in touch. And as it turned out, almost a year after my heart attack, my company, the pharmaceutical company I was working for, restructured me out of my job. And so now I was out of work. I'd left my marriage. We'd sold our house. And I was in a position where I could go to India now. So I reached out to him and I said, I can come to India now. And so we set about planning a trip. So he arranged for me to meet him in Varanasi. And I arranged for a young Buddhist monk who was learning English to basically escort me through India and Nepal. And retracing the path of the Buddha was what the intent of the trip was. So that was the first part of my, my spiritual awakening. And that trip was life-changing. If you don't come back from being in a country like India and Nepal and, being up in Sherpa where the earthquakes had happened and seeing how much poverty there is and no toilet paper, no running water, no electricity. If you don't come back humbled and grateful for your life, the life that we take for granted here in the modern world, in the first, the first world, I don't know. I don't know what's wrong. There's something's wrong with you because I came back with a completely different outlook on life. And, and I bought a motorcycle when I came back, and I had this calling, something else that I've really tapped into is my intuition, that internal
Mm-hmm.
knowing that we all have inside of us. And I bought a motorcycle, Sally, and I traveled from Canada to Costa Rica solo. I just knew I needed to go away. I needed to go away, and I was looking for answers. Why did I have a heart attack? Why was I so fit and healthy? How could I possibly have it? It made no medical sense. No doctor has been able to tell me why. But yet my intuition was telling me, my heart was telling me, okay, you need to go, because there's some secrets that you need to unlock.
Mm-hmm. Did you manage to find these secrets, or are you still on the journey?
Well, I'm still on the journey. I believe the journey will be lifelong and is lifelong, and will only end when I leave this body, and then I'll begin my next journey. But I did actually. I again, I've done a lot of personal work. Plant medicine is something that came to me on my journey, and it never, in the beginning, I was really curious about it, but it just never worked out. The timing of doing an ayahuasca ceremony just never worked out, but yet it kept being put in front of me. I'd meet people, strangers, and they think, oh, you need to do an ayahuasca. And first time I heard that, I was like, "Aya what?"
I was going to say.
Yeah, I had no idea what I had no idea what ayahuasca was. So for those that are listening, ayahuasca is it's a ceremony that is done. It originates in the jungles of South America. Peru is very well known, but Brazil and other parts of South America. And it's 2 vines. And these shamans, these medicine men and women, they take these vines and they make a drink out of it. And one of them contains DMT, which is a hallucinogenic agent. And the other one is it contains a chemical that allows the DMT to cross the blood-brain barrier. So when you drink the drink, the medicine, and I do believe it's called plant medicine for a reason, and you drink it, you are experiencing. They say it's the spirit of a woman. You're actually connecting with Mother Earth,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a very powerful psychedelic experience. And I'd never done any psychedelics before in my life, never done mushrooms or anything like that. And, but I went in with a real clear intention, and something on my journey, I started to have memories come up of being molested when I was a little boy, but I couldn't really tap into it, but I knew it had happened, but I didn't know the extent of it. And so my intention, I had written pages of intentions for this ayahuasca ceremony. And when the day arrived, it was a 3-day weekend ceremony. The shaman came around and asked everybody, individually, had a little interview. What's your intention? And I said, I've got some childhood memories that I'm having trouble accessing, and I want to access this. I want to help with it. And that's what she gave me, the medicine. It was a very powerful. The first night was a 10-hour ceremony in darkness. It was beautiful and scary and sad, and I cried. I purged like crazy. Purging is the body's way of releasing it energetically, physically, and I relived, my whole molestation. It was somebody known to my family. It was the son of friends of my parents, and I was 7 years old. He was around 17 or 18, and the beautiful thing about it, Sally, is I have an answer. I mean, no doctor's going to confirm this, but I know that keeping that a secret for 40 years, the dirty little secret, the guilt, the shame around it, really caught up with me. And the beautiful thing is that I came out of it, and I was an angry person before my heart attack. I had a lot of anger issues and deeply unhappy, blaming other people. I was a victim. Mm-hmm. And I came out of the ceremony with so much clarity that now I know why.
Yeah.
Why I had my heart attack.
Yeah, mind-body connection is incredible, and we're, in the 21st century, we're only just beginning to take it on, and we've been talking about it for years and years.
Yeah.
So your life-changing heart attack really was life-changing in so many ways.
So many ways, yeah.
Yeah. And it's taken you on incredible journeys that I'm guessing that prior to the heart attack, you would never even considered, the job change. I know it was forced upon you and that. So to me, it sounds like you were looking for a purpose with the travelling. Mm. What have you found to be your purpose? Because we met through Instagram and your Facebook group, etc. Is that part of it?
Absolutely. I mean, it's still unfolding. It's still unraveling. It's still, it's the beautiful thing. The mystery of life is beautiful, right? The unknown. I believe in possibilities. That's one of my favorite words is just be open to possibilities, because possibilities are endless. And when I lost my job, they were worried about me. They're like, "Are you going to be okay?" And I was like grinning from ear to ear, and I'm like, "I can go to India now," and so I've had a monumental mindset shift. Would be one of the biggest changes. I used to be a negative person. I used to be a judgy person. I would knock people down to make me feel better. Operating from a place that wasn't authentic. I created what I created this, I call it a bullshit bubble. I created this protective bubble around my heart, or a barrier around my heart. I never really let anybody in because my heart was broken. When the day I was molested, my heart was broken. Yeah. And I really believe that. And it's interesting, Sally, people would ask me why you had a heart attack, and I would say stress and a broken heart. Mm-hmm. And that was before I knew what had happened to me when I was young. It was so deeply suppressed into my subconscious but yet I was saying stress and a broken heart. And I have a book here. It's called Heartbreak and Heart Disease. There's a lot of emerging evidence that there is such a thing as a real broken heart. And my heart was broken, and it was vulnerable and stress. And I didn't handle stress well. And I brought a lot of stress on by the way I was operating in my life.
How do you handle the stress now? I know you'd mentioned meditation. Is that a key part of your lifestyle now?
It is. I learned to meditate. Again, prior to my heart attack, my interest in Buddhism and the Dalai Lama and meditation, but I could never do it, or at least I thought I could never do it. Mm-hmm. But the problem wasn't that I couldn't do it. It's what I didn't really know what it was. I never had anybody really explain to me what meditation is. And for those that are listening, meditation is really about being still. It's about quieting your mind. But that's the work, because as a human being, it's really hard for us to quiet our mind. Even the Dalai Lama says he can't stop thoughts from coming in. And I would go to these, I would do these one-day meditation courses, and I would come away more frustrated, almost angry, because I'm going like, what's wrong with me? Why? I look around the room and I see these people who look like they're like the Buddha. They're in this Zen state, and I'm sitting there and I can't shut my mind off. And I would get agitated by it. But what I've learned on my journey is that's the work. That's the work. It's thoughts are going to come. It's what do you do with those thoughts? And over the years, 5 years now, I've been meditating in my practice, and it's a practice because you have to practice it daily.
Absolutely. Yes.
It's why they call it a yoga practice. It's a meditation practice. And, I do a lot of, breath-based meditation. So it's about, you have a thought come in, you acknowledge it, and you let it go, and you go back to focusing on the breath. You give your monkey mind something to do. Well, say, I want you to focus on the breath. And, I just read an article. I would say this a lot, and I'm reframing it. I'm going to reframe it here too, because it has changed my life. I'm less reactive. I'm more able to respond now versus react. And it's brought a calm to me, a peace to me. Like I say, people that know me say I'm unrecognizable because I'm so much calmer.
Mm-hmm. Well, you've described, it seems like you have actually kind of had a massive change, because looking at you, because I can see you and hearing you, there is a calm and a peace about you. And yet you described yourself as being angry and that. So would you say that that's the meditation that has created that change, or the life experiences that you had after the heart attack?
I would say it's both. I don't know if I could pin it to one thing exactly. I think it's the fact that I recognized that I needed to change. I recognized that if I didn't change, if I didn't listen to the calling that was calling me forward, I really feel that my heart attack was the greatest teacher to enter my life. That and fatherhood, having a son, a great teacher for me. And I was called to the floor, and I answered the call. And but I didn't know when I just knew. I just said yes to it. And I took this crazy trip, for almost a year, and so much time alone. I didn't like the guy I saw in the mirror before my heart attack. I didn't like the man I was becoming or had become. And now I look in the mirror and I go, like, you're a good guy. Like I get told that all the time, that you're like, I teach guided meditations. I teach people how to meditate, and people say, I've got a calming voice. I couldn't see that. I'm starting to see that now. I'm starting to feel that, that there is a calm. But I still have my demons. I still, I'm a recovering negative self-talker. And, I believe that when we talk negative and we say negative things to ourselves, like I would say things to myself, Sally, that I would never say to any other human being, but yet I would say it to myself. And I believe when you do that, you hurt your heart. So I wasn't, even though my heart was broken, I wasn't really helping it.
Yeah.
I was making it worse, and I have a lot more patience now. And I'm a lot more in flow. I used to get asked all the time, is what's your plan when you're taking this motorcycle trip? And I would say, my plan is no plan.
Yeah. Just go with the flow. Yeah.
Go with the flow. And if I went somewhere and I liked it, I'd stay. And if I didn't, I trust my intuition with my life. And I think that has given me so much peace and calm, knowing that there's a master plan for me, and I'm going to be shown the way if I'm listening. Yes. And if I'm eyes open, if my heart's open, if my mind is open, if my eyes are open, I'm going to be given clues and nudges, and like fairy dust, the fairy dust that gets sprinkled, or the breadcrumbs that I had blinders on in my life before. I wasn't open to possibilities, and I forced things. And you can't force life. You gotta to a point. There's certain things you got to do every day to survive in this modern world. But when you can surrender, and you can let go, and you can trust in a higher power, in a higher purpose, it's beautiful, because I feel that I am in my purpose. I mean, I'm a life coach now. I'm a professional life coach. That kind of came to me on my journey. Again, no idea what life coaching was until I kind of started to explore it. And with the Heart Attack Thriver, part of my mission is to raise awareness to the role that stress plays, because I think stress is a silent killer. Stress causes inflammation in our bodies. The body creates or secretes hormones of stress when we're under stress and we're in a stressed out state. It was designed, to protect us back when we were really primitive. It's our reptile brain, or our amygdala. It's meant to put us into fight or flight. But in today's life, we're running stress. We're stressed out. Jobs, mortgages, COVID, makes it next level. There's so many stressors in our lives that when we don't handle it, our body is in this elevated state of stress. And this elevated state of stress leads to inflammation. We're talking about cortisol, epinephrine, norepinephrine, adrenaline. All of these are meant to get us into a heightened state so we can run away from the danger, run away from the bear. And then when the bear's gone, or we're out of harm's way, we can return to a normal state. And what's happening, I believe, today is we're not returning to a normal state. So we're seeing inflammation in our bodies.
Yeah, and that in turn flow, isn't it? There is, it's usually just one bear, but now, as you just mentioned, it's all of the things all of the time, and there is no reprieve, and we don't get to actually burn it off as energy when we are running away, because we don't actually have that much control over some of the things. So yeah, I'm totally with you on that. So You've mentioned a couple of things that would help people when in their recovery, which is one, to relax and go with the flow, which I think is actually, it's so simple, but it really is. If we fight life, it's just creating more of the same chemicals. And meditation. Is there anything else that you would share as being, if somebody was listening to the show and they were feeling anxious, angry, because some people do feel angry after a heart attack, what would you suggest that they could do to help themselves feel better?
Well, I think, one thing that we're given every day is choice.
Yeah.
You wake up in the morning, you can choose to be a victim to the past, to your life, or you can choose to be the hero. And when I say that, and I love Joseph Campbell's book, The Hero's Journey, you get to write the story every day of your life. And if you wake up, and I mean, I was there, and in the beginning I'd walk around like, why me? I was in a victim mindset. I'd see somebody overweight walking down the sidewalk, and I'd be like, huh, and I had the heart attack. Thought I was doing everything right. I was super fit, active, healthy. And then, something shifted for me, and it was like, why not me? Why can't I take what happened to me and turn it to something bigger than that and help others? And I have a saying that when we share our story, so every time I share my story, it gives people permission to share their stories. But more importantly, when I share my story, I know that my story and your story is the medicine that somebody out there needs to receive. We all have medicine on our heart. And I believe that by sharing my story and telling people that it's going to be okay, that having a heart attack isn't a death sentence. In my coaching, I coach people that have had heart attacks too. I've taken the grief model, the 5 stages of grief, which are about grieving the loss of a loved one. Well, I apply it to grieving what I call the loss of your old self.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, 100%.
Old Brian died that day. So part of Sally died the day you had your heart attack. And you need to move through that. You need to allow yourself, you need to be patient. You need to be kind with yourself, allow yourself grace to heal and to figure out what your new normal is, because we both have a new normal. My life is forever changed, and I'm grateful for that. So to your question, I think that choice you have every day, the mindset that you choose, you can choose, to allow, yourself to move through it, to heal, or you can stay bitter and angry and negative about it. And why is me, and that's not going to serve you. That's not going to help you in the long run. So I do a lot of work. I call myself a mindset coach, and I call it a thriver mindset. I'm doing everything like I'm in a new country now. I've met a partner, a new partner, Adrian, who I met on my motorcycle trip early on in Sedona at sunrise on a hike. Like, the chances of us meeting, all the things that had to go wrong and go right for us to be in that same moment, and then now 3 years later to be together and building a life together, that's just, to me, is just magic.
It sounds like your life has been magic since your heart attack. It sounds like you've really turned everything around. And I so love the fact that you want to help others, because that's what I got out of my heart attack. It just changed it. I've always been a people person, and I've always been a hypnotherapist and life coach, etc. But my drive to actually help people increased so much because I needed to heal my own heart through helping others, I think. So where could people find out more about your coaching and about your IGTV and on Facebook, etc.? Where and what is it that you have?
Well, we'll start with Instagram first. So a couple years ago, I changed my personal page to the Heart Attack Thriver. So on Instagram, you can find me at the Heart Attack Thriver. And every week I interview, people that have had heart attacks. I know you're going to be coming up, sharing your story. I interview people that have had events of the heart, I don't limit it to just heart attacks. I had a heart attack. I'm thriving. This week's guest, I have a guest today on who had cardiomyopathy, so an enlarged heart, and he's dealing with the aftermath of that. So it's anything heart related, matters of the heart, events of the heart. So again, back to that, our stories are the medicine that people out there need to receive. I also think it's part of the healing. I think we heal when we share our stories. Just speaking it out there and releasing it out there. It's energy that we're releasing as well. So I think I'm providing a platform for people to do that. So it then goes to Instagram TV. So it's very much like this. And I'm creating a podcast around it. I'm working towards pulling the audio off the previous videos that I've been doing. I do them once a week, every Friday. For those in the UK, it's 6:00 your time, PM, 11 a.m. Pacific time. I interview these people, but I also bring on doctors and nurses and cardiac rehab specialists, nutrition, dietitians, bringing information to people, yogis, and people that meditate. I had a psychiatrist on who's a friend of mine, Michael Rosenbluth, who works in depression and anxiety, and he incorporates meditation and mindfulness into his practice. Which is fabulous, and so that's what I do with my social media profile, and then in terms of the life coaching, I go by the Kindfulness Coach.
I love that. I used to talk to my daughter about kindfulness when she was growing up, and I didn't know it was a word until I saw yours.
yeah, and I mean I borrowed that from a book called Kindfulness, and it was written by a Buddhist monk that I was fortunate to meet. His name is Ashan Brahm. He's actually from the UK. He lives in Australia, and he wrote this book, Kindfulness, and because he felt that mindfulness is being kind of dragged around. It's being almost degraded in a way. You're seeing corporations, that are sending their CEOs for mindfulness training and all of this. And so what they can pillage the earth mindfully, and he really felt that we're losing what mindfulness really is. And he said, so I think instead of mindfulness, we need more kindfulness in the world. And kindfulness is just kindness and compassion for yourself first, so that you can turn it outward to the world. And so I thought, I'm gonna call myself the Kindfulness Coach, and especially being someone who wasn't kind to myself, who was a negative. I said earlier, I'm a recovering negative self-talker. That just really resonated with me. So it's kindfulness with one L, and I go by the Kindfulness Coach. So I have a website. It's thekindfulnesscoach.com. And you can also reach me via email at Brian with an I, at thekindfulnesscoach.com.
Okay, well, I will link to all of those in the show notes and everything. But I'm going to wrap up now and say, Brian, it has been absolutely fantastic talking to you. You've been a brilliant guest. I've really loved listening to you. And I just wanted to know, is there anything else you would like to say at the end of this interview? Or have you got a request to come back and maybe teach some meditation later?
I would be honored to come back and lead a guided meditation.
Putting you on the spot there.
Yeah, no, I that's the gift I didn't realize I had. Before COVID, I was, leading Sunday evenings. I was doing, guided meditations with small groups of people, and I got really great feedback. And, I'll say this because it makes me kind of smile, but I've said this to people that if pre-heart attack Brian could have fast forwarded to today, to right now, and to be above looking down on me, talking to you and listening to what I'm saying, I would have called bullshit back then. Because I have become very spiritual, and I have changed, and meditation has changed my life. And if I have one parting thing I want to say to people is, live your life. Live your life. You only get one chance at this lifetime, in this body. And I have a plaque on my wall from the Buddha, and it says, the trouble is you think you have time. So don't wait. If there's something you want to do, and that's something I do with my coaching, as I help clients dream big. Dream. What do you want to do before you die? If money was no object, what are the things you want to do? And then we set about trying to figure out how we can make it happen. And so I want to encourage people to dream.
Excellent.
Dream is so important. Be open to possibilities, and just live your life. Live your life. Just try and live it to the best of your ability every day.
Well, I'm certainly going to be doing that, and I'm even more excited about life because you've just created that energy in me. Not that I needed it, because I was already going to, but it's lovely being around people that are feeling and thinking the same way as me. So thank you, Brian. It's been brilliant.
Thank you, Sally. It was a lot of fun talking to you.
Cheers.
You've been listening to Sally Crawley and the My Heart and Mind podcast, a show for you if you've had a heart attack, cardiac event, or other life-changing experience and want to feel good. It's all about mastering your feelings and emotions so you can feel great and live the life you love. To find out more, visit www.myheartandmind.co.uk and note that that's an AND and not the ampersand character. Go be magnificent.